let's get started making this overhead GUI. So first what we actually want to do is we want to design what we want our UI to look like. So in order to do that, we're going to come up to plugins, actually, and we're going to, your layout is going to look different than mine, but you want to find this button that says build rig. You'll click that button and then you just click block rig, and it will insert an R15 character into your world. This script will work with R15 and R6, so it doesn't necessarily matter which one you pick. If you wanted to do R6, you could just click the R6 button within this UI, click block rig for that, and you'll get something like this. But like I said, this script will work for both, so it's not too important. So what we want to do now is we want to click our NPC here, which is named dummy in the workspace. We want to open this up, and we want to click this little plus button, and we want to find where it says billboard GUI. Now we have a lot of stuff here, so we don't really want to search everything. So what we can do is we can just search it up here. Type in BI and billboard GUI is like the first thing that pops up. So we insert one of those. We scroll down a bit, and it's down here. So what a billboard GUI is, well, let me show you. If we insert, for example, a text label now into the billboard GUI by clicking that plus button. So now we can see that there's kind of like this weird looking thing poking out from our character, right? This is actually a text label like you'd find on the GUI. So what we want to do in our billboard GUI actually is we want to bring it up so it's above their heads so we can actually read what the text says. So to do that, we want to come down here to where it says studs offset. When we click on our billboard GUI in the properties menu, studs offset, we want to bump it up to maybe like 4. Actually, let's try 3. 3.5. Yeah. So as we can see now, we have this label above their head, and this is where we're actually going to be displaying all of our information, like the name, rank, and division, for example. So what we want to do actually is we want to change the way this is sized. So let's click our text label, and we're going to change the size to use scale rather than offset. So we want to change the size to 1010. We're not going to see a change here yet, but when we do the same thing to our billboard GUI, changing the size to 1010, now we see we have this square that sizes correctly when we move away and get closer to our NPC. Now we have this dummy name above our NPC, which is kind of getting in the way. So let's go up to the humanoid in the properties menu. We're going to change display distance type. We're going to change that to none, and that will get rid of our name. So now we can easily see our UI without being interrupted or covered by other names, I guess. We're also going to change something called light influence on our UI, because right now you can see that if we move, color of the UI background kind of changes a bit. So here it's like really white, here it gets dark. If we change light influence to 0 when we click on our billboard GUI, that will make it so it's consistent everywhere. It's much easier to read. So now that we have this all set up, we're going to add in a few more items here. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in a UI list layout into our billboard GUI, and we're going to see what that does here in a moment. So we're going to take our text label, and we're going to copy. So Control C, click our billboard GUI, Control V, drag it into the billboard GUI. So it hasn't changed anything, but that's because our text labels are so big that our billboard GUI can't display both of them. So what we want to do is actually we want to hover over both of our text labels. Change here the size. This is the Y size, the height. If you change this to 0.5 rather than 1, now we'll see that we have both of our text labels showing up. Because the billboard GUI works in a way that it can only display stuff within its bounds, it's called. So anything outside of this square just won't be displayed. So we want to make sure that everything we do fits inside the square. But we can make the square bigger, actually. So remember how we changed the billboard size to 1010? Well, maybe let's try changing the X size to 3. Maybe we want to change the Y size to 2. So now that's a bit bigger now, so we have a bit more room to play with. But because we've done that, we also want to increase the studs offset to maybe like 4 now. Yeah, that should be good. So we actually want 3 different labels within our billboard GUI. We want one for the name, so let's just name this now to name. We want one for our rank, and then we want another one. So this time we're gonna do Control D to duplicate. So hit Control D on the rank one, and we'll create another rank one within the same parent. we want to name this one group. So now we're going to hover over our rank and group ones, and we're going to change the size to 0.3. Yeah, let's do 0.3, and then we'll change the name size to 0.4. Excellent. So now we have our 3 labels. They all fit. We want our name to be slightly bigger than the other ones to make it easier to read. And then we have our other 2 down here that are smaller. So now let's put some placeholder text. So let's change the text of the name to player name. For the rank, let's do rank. For the group, let's do group. Now, if your stuff isn't displaying in this order, there's actually quite an easy way to fix this. So we have this thing called layout order in our UI elements. And what this does, it tells the UI list layout how we want to actually display our items here. So we want the list order, if the list order is 0, it's going to be displayed on the top, and anything above 0 will be displayed lower and lower. So we want our name to be 0, that we will change our rank layout order, or sorry, our group layout order to be 1, and our rank will be 2, because we want our group to be displayed on top of our rank. So now we have 0 for our name, 1 for our group, 2 for our rank, because we want this to be displayed in that order. We also want to make sure that our UI list layout, its sort order is set to layout order rather than name, and then this will update accordingly into your games as well. So now let's style our UI a bit. We want to remove the background. We want to make the text a bit bigger. So let's turn on text scaled, and let's change the font color to a white color. And then also, I think it looks good if we have a bit of a background or an outline on our text. So let's change the text stroke transparency to 0.5. And maybe let's change the font to something more bold. Yeah, something like this. All right, so that's our styled UI for now. You guys can obviously change it and make it however you want. This is the one we're going to be using for this video. Let's name our billboard UI. Let's name it overhead UI. And let's get to the scripting side of things. So I'm just going to save it real quick by hitting Alt-P. If you guys haven't already saved your game, you're going to get a dialog open up to save your game. Create a new game, save your work, because if Roblox crashes, you're going to lose everything. So always save your work, just in case that happens. And so I think for this system, we're only going to actually need 2 different scripts. So we're going to make one in server scripts service, and we are going to name it overhead GUI. So let's remove this print hello world. We won't need that. So let's talk about how the script is going to work. So we want it so every time our player spawns, they get this overhead UI above their head that shows their name, their rank, and their group. So how do we go about doing that? So first we have to import a service called players. So local players equals game get service players. And this gives us access to functions and events. Sorry, we're going to be using events in this video, but events that allow us to detect when a player joins the game and when their character loads into the game. So for that, we have to do players.playerAdded. Let me make this a bit bigger for you guys. Players.playerAdded will detect when a player joins the game. And in order to use that function, we have to write this word connect with a semicolon here. And we have to make a new function. So let me explain what we're doing here. So we're detecting when a player joins the game. When a player joins the game, when its function is connected, we want to run this function here. And when this function runs, it will also pass in a player variable for us to use. And this player variable has a character added event that we can connect to. And that will give us the character. And so now we have these 2 events happening. We detect when a player joins the game and when their character is added to the game. Now, if we just leave the code like this, we're going to have what's called a memory leak. So what a memory leak is we're connecting an event here, and once the player leaves the game, we no longer need this event, but it's still taking up memory in our game. So what we actually want to do is we want to make sure that we are removing this event function when the player leaves the game in order to not clog up our game over time. So what we want to do is players dot, so we can detect when they're leaving the game, connect to that. Once again, we can get their player. So when the player is leaving the game, we want to clean up this function. Well, how do we do that? We will need to create another variable up at the top of our script. Local, we'll just name it connections. And we'll use these curly brackets to say that we want it to be a table. So connections equals curly brackets. So now that we have these, we want to actually add our event to this table so we can remove it. So how would we do that, you ask? Well, let me show you. So we're going to do connections player equals, and then we're going to keep what we already had. So what this is saying is that the connection for our player inside of our table is going to be equal to what we wrote before. And now, because we've done this, what we can actually do now is down here in our player removing, we can do connections player. We can disconnect it. And then what we can do is we can set it to nil, and that will completely remove the memory from our game and keep our game running nice and smooth. Now, in the odd scenario where our player doesn't have a connection, we actually want to check for this. So we want to do, if our player actually has a connection, then we will actually disconnect it and remove it from the game. So what we want, so I'm just going to go over what we did here quickly. We want to check if the player has a connection within our table. We want to take our connection, we want to disconnect it, then we want to set that memory to nil in our table. Once we have this all settled, we can go back to writing our actual function that puts in our overhead GUI onto our character. Let's come back out here for a second, and let's go find our overhead GUI that we've made earlier. And let's take it and drag it inside of our script. So let's remove it from the game, let's put it inside of our script. And now what we want to do is when the character joins the game, we want to take our overhead GUI and put it into the character. So let's make another variable at the top of our script. Local overhead template. And then we'll do script.overhead GUI. Yeah. So we want to create a new template, and that will be the template that's inside the script, which is the script.overhead GUI because it's inside the script, of course. So now that we have our template, we can do local new overhead equals overhead template, and we're going to clone it to basically copy it, and then we're going to set its parent, dot parent, we're going to set it to the character. So this will take our clone, this will take our template and put it inside of our character. And we can actually test this script out now. So I come up here to the test tab and click play, and we should have see, now we have our UI above our head here. We don't have any errors, which is good, and it will follow us around. Now, it is kind of bouncy and weird. So, in order to fix that, let's try parenting it. Rather than parent it to the character, we're going to parent it to the humanoid root part. And now if we parent it to that, it will stay nice and smooth above our character, no matter how we're moving, jumping, falling, whatever. Awesome. So now that we have that following our character nice and smoothly, I think we should actually increase the height a bit. So let's change our height to maybe like 4.5. In our overhead GUI in the properties menu, come back to our script, and we do want to change one thing. Sometimes when your character first loads in, the humanoid root part isn't actually created yet, so we want to wait until it's created so our script won't error. We can do that by doing character wait for child humanoid root part, and that will parent it to the root part after it's loaded in. So now that we have everything loaded in, we have our overhead UI parenting to our root part. We actually want now to change the name, change the group, change the rank and everything. Let's create a few lines in between when we're parenting and creating the overhead. We're going to do new overhead. And what did we name it? We named it. We do have to be careful here. I made a mistake here. We shouldn't have named the name thing in our overhead GUI. We shouldn't have named it name. We should have named it player name. The reason why I say that is because overhead GUI itself has a property named name. So if we also name our text label name, it's going to mess around and screw everything up. So so we want to make sure that we name our name player name rather than name like we had it before. So now that in our script, we can actually set the player name. We can set its text to the player.name. Now, when we test this out, we will see that our name is now capital letters above our head. Now we just have to change the group and rank. So how do we do the group and rank? Because we want this script to be compatible with multiple divisions, for example, if you had multiple divisions in your group, or multiple groups for whatever reason. What we want to do is we want to come up here to our overhead UI, add in a module script inside of our UI. We're going to remove everything from our module script, and we're just going to type in return curly brackets. As I've mentioned before, curly brackets give us a table. Inside of our table, now we want to specify what type of divisions we want to display on our overhead GUI. So for our first division, we're going to give it a name. So, sorry, I should explain what I'm doing here. We're going to create another table within our table by doing more curly brackets. So that will create another table within our table. We'll set its name to something like, I'm going to use my Lettuce Entertainment group. So I'll name this, the name will be Lettuce Entertainment. We're also going to give it a custom color. We'll name this color color3 from RGB. And because it's lettuce, obviously we'll do green. And we have to set it a group ID. So let me just fetch my group ID here. So you can get it on ROBLOX here. Let me just bring it over. So if you go to your groups, we have my Lettuce Entertainment group here. Group ID is up here. So www.roblox.com/groups. Your ID is these numbers here. We want to copy that number, come back to our script, paste this number within our module. Now, how do we add multiple groups here? We're just going to copy everything we did here, our two curly brackets. So Control-C to copy. Now, after our curly bracket here, where my mouse is, we're going to add a comma. What this comma will allow us to do is add more tables after our first table, like so. So now that we have these two things here, I'm just going to name this some other group, and I'm going to go find a group that I'm not in. For example, let me just do this real quick. This is a clone group that I'm in, but I'm not in this division, for example. So this one won't display for me because I'm not in it. Now I'll change the color to this, maybe something like white. Well, we use white for something else, maybe red. So if I was in this some other group here, my rank would show as red, but because I'm only in Lettuce Entertainment, it's only going to show this green color for me. So basically, what we want to do now is we want to get this module script into our main script so we can use it. Let's name our module script something like rank information, and then let's bring it into our main script here. Local rank information equals require, and then we want to get the script dot rank information. So for module scripts, in order to use module scripts, we have to require it using the syntax here, require script.rank information, because that's the name of the module and it's within our script. Now that we have this data, we can actually loop through it. So let's do this. For this is an underscore. You can do any variable you want here. We're not going to be using it, so that's why I use an underscore. If you use an underscore in Lua, It doesn't create a memory. It doesn't create anything in memory for that slot, so it's actually saving you memory if you use an underscore rather than a variable that you're never going to use. So that's why we use an underscore here. And so let me just write out this, and then I'll explain it in a moment here. So what we want to do is we want to loop through our rank information module, which looks like this, the one we just wrote. We want to get the information. So basically that info variable will be what this table is. So we can get the name, color, group ID. But we want to do it for every single element in the rank information. So that's why we got this for loop here. So basically it will go, the first time it goes through, we'll have this one. The second time we'll be looking at that one. If you had more, third and fourth time, it'd go through everything, and you can access each one individually. So first what we want to do is we want to determine if the player is actually in that division. So local is player in division. We will set this to player, and then we will do is in group, and then we'll do the info.group ID. So this will tell us if the player is in the division, and if the player is in the division, so if player in division is set to true, then we want to update our text in our overhead GUI. So we want to do new overhead dot group dot text equals info dot name, and new overhead dot rank dot text equals player get role in group info dot group ID. So what this does is we determine if the player is in the division by using this player is in group, and then we have our group ID thing that we added into our module here. If they are in that ID, or sorry, if they are in that group, we will set the group names text in our overhead to the info.name, which in this case would be Latest Entertainment, and we'll set the rank text to whatever rank name they have in that group. In my case, I think it's founder or president or something like that. We also want to update the color, and we will update the color for the group. So new overhead dot group dot text color 3 equals info dot color. So now if we test out this game, I have a green Latest Entertainment text above my head, and I have the owner tag above my head, because that's what I am in the group. I'm the owner of Latest Entertainment, and my name, group, everything's showing up really nice. Now, what would happen if, I'm just going to change the group ID quickly. What would happen if I'm not in any of the groups and I just want the player name to be displayed? So in this case, we're going to get this template looking thing, which doesn't look very nice. We want it to maybe look something more like, let me just do this up real quick. We want it to look something more like this, for example, but we also want it to be at the bottom perhaps. So it would look something more like this, where it's just our name, right? So we can actually do that really easily. We want, in our overhead UI, we want to just change the UI list layout. We want to change the vertical alignment to bottom. And we want to make sure that group and rank by default have their visibility set to false. So once we've done that, if we just play the game now, we will only have our name above our head, which is fine if that's all you wanted, but we also want the information to be displayed. So how do we fix that? We come up here to our script again, new overhead, and we're going to set the visible to true, and then we're also going to set the new overhead dot rank dot visible to true. And now, well, I'm not actually in any divisions because I changed the number. It's not going to show for me, but if I revert to the rank information script to the division that I'm in, my information will now load in properly. So we have this Latest Entertainment and owner above our head now. One last thing we have to do is, for example, if we start a game with 2 players, I'm just going to show you this as an example. If we have 2 players in our game, what will happen is the overhead UI will start to overlap with the player's name. So what we can see here is we have our custom text but we also have their normal text here, which is not what we want at all. So let's clean this up to remove it. In our overhead GUI, what we also want to do is change our, down here before we parent it, we will do character dot, we'll do wait for child for the humanoid. And remember how we disabled the name on our dummy in the early part of this video? We did display distance type equal to none. So what we will do that, or sorry, we'll do that for our humanoid on our character as well. And so in order to do that, we have to do enum dot display distance type dot none. Let me zoom out a bit there so it's not cutting off. Awesome. So we are waiting for the humanoid to load into our character because sometimes it doesn't load in right away. We are setting its display distance type to none. In order to access that none, we have to do enum.humanoid display distance type dot none. And now if we test this with 2 players in our game, once it gives it a second to load up, we will have a nice clean UI where nothing is being blocked anymore. Now, none of these 2 players are in the group because they're not me. They're fictional players that Roblox Studio creates, so that's why none of the information is showing up. But I promise to you that it will show up as long as you follow this script. So let's do a nice quick overview of the script. We have to get the player service. We get our module so we can access the rank information later on. We have to do all these connections to make sure that we're cleaning up our game when the player leaves the game. And we do that in our player removing function here. Next, we determine when the character is added to the game, give them a new overhead from our template, change this player's name, and if they are in a group based on our module, we will change their rank and group information, make sure that their name on the humanoid doesn't display, and then we'll set its parent to its humanoid. And we just want to test one more thing before we finish off this video, is we want to make sure that when we die, and our character dies in the game, that it will go back into our character when we respawn. And we can see here that it does. So that's the end of this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Nice little Christmas present for you guys. You probably weren't expecting me to upload another video. I want to upload more videos, as I said multiple times in my videos, but we'll see. Life keeps getting in the way. So, yep, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure you like, subscribe to this channel, and I will see you guys in the next one.